Welcome to the Jersey Urology Group HIPAA Compliance Training Program. This is an important and mandatory part of your employment training for your activities with Jersey Urology Group. During the course of the presentation, we will walk through a series of different slides explaining your obligations and Jersey Urology Group's obligations with regard to HIPAA compliance. My name is Bruce Arman. I'll be joined today by my colleague Kerry Lynn Bayes. We are both attorneys with the law firm of Saul Ewing, which regularly provides legal services for Jersey Urology Group. Please be aware, at the end of this presentation, there will be a quiz. So your constant involvement and paying attention to the slides is appreciated, not only for purposes of passing the quiz, but for making sure you understand the importance of HIPAA and its everyday activities for Jersey Urology Group. We'll now switch to slide 2. On this slide is a good way to start for all of you to think about the importance of HIPAA and patient privacy in general. As you can see, this is a cartoon using the analogy of the 3 bears, where one of the bears says someone's been eating my soup, another bear says someone's been sitting in my chair, and the third bear says someone's been accessing my doctor's records. It's very important in your daily functions for Jersey Urology Group that you pay attention to patient information, who gets it, where it goes, how it applies, and most importantly, how that patient information needs to be protected by Jersey Urology Group. During the course of the presentation today, we'll provide an overview of HIPAA, which is a federal law that we'll talk about shortly. Within the federal HIPAA law, there are several different subparts that we will address today. One is the privacy rule, the second is the security rule, and the third is the breach notification rule. There are specific issues in the law with regard to each of these items. Finally, as it relates to the presentation today, we will provide an overview on the various slides of the activities that you need to be aware of with respect to your responsibilities under HIPAA, regardless of your job function.
As Bruce mentioned, HIPAA is a federal law. HIPAA's been around since 1996. However, there's been some more recent changes that are important to your daily functions and to Jersey Urology Group's HIPAA compliance. In 2009, as part of the stimulus bill, an act was passed called HITECH, which included new legal changes to the HIPAA law, including, for the first time ever, a breach reporting requirement. In January of 2013, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, that oversees HIPAA compliance, published final regulations that implement the HITECH Act. Those new rules have been in place since September of 2013, and they do include a final breach notification rule. We'll touch upon HIPAA breaches later in the presentation. It's important to understand that HIPAA has many parts, and there's different categories of rules within HIPAA. We've listed them here on this slide, and they include not only privacy protections, which may be what you're most familiar with, but they also include electronic transactions and code sets. And what this means is when there's different electronic transactions done, like billing, that all different healthcare providers are using the same sets of codes and numbers so that the healthcare industry performs more efficiently. There's also security standards that we'll be talking about later, breach notification provisions, and enforcement of the HIPAA rule, which we'll also touch upon at the end of the presentation.
So what is the privacy rule? The privacy rule under HIPAA sets the national rules to protect the privacy of what's called protected health information, or PHI, and you'll see us use that term throughout the course of the presentation today. And to whom does the protected health information apply? It applies to groups called covered entities. You'll also see that term underlined, and it will be discussed today. The focus of the privacy rule is that PHI, or that protected health information, and this is where the regulation describes a little bit about what that information includes. Protected health information is actually a subset of what's called individually identifiable health information, or IIHI, and this covers information that's either transmitted or maintained in electronic or any other form or medium. So having that PHI is what's covered by the HIPAA protections. Again, the IIHI, or the individually identifiable health information, is the type of information that the government believes can be used as a reasonable basis to identify a particular individual. There are a series of different criterion that the government includes that fall within the umbrella of IIHI. If we start with the protected health information, and we then use the individually identifiable health information, the largest category is health information. And health information, as you can see from this slide, is any information in any form or medium that's created or received by a healthcare provider, as well as any of these other categories, and this is very broad, relates to the past, present, or future physical or mental health or condition of an individual. Basically, it's all of the types of information that Jersey Urology Group is going to be handling on behalf of its patients.
As we mentioned earlier, covered entities is the name of the types of entities that have to comply with the HIPAA privacy rule. And there's 3 different kinds of covered entities. Healthcare providers that transmit health information in electronic form and connect it in connection with what's called a covered transaction. And we'll define healthcare providers, but the electronic transactions that are covered by the HIPAA rule are generally billing type procedures. So Jersey Urology Group conducts electronic billing transactions, and therefore they are covered entities. The other types of covered entities are health plans and healthcare clearinghouses. So we mentioned that Jersey Urology Group is a healthcare provider. And a healthcare provider is any individual organization that in the regular course of business furnishes, bills, or is paid for healthcare services. And as we mentioned, that covers Jersey Urology Group and their functions because they do electronic billing transactions.
So once we know what the definition of protected health information is, it's very important for Jersey Urology Group and its employees to understand what are the appropriate uses and disclosures of that protected health information. From a general principle, covered entities like Jersey Urology Group may not use or disclose the protected health information except as HIPAA allows it. It's important to remember that there are some exceptions. For instance, a patient consent is not required when the protected health information is used for specific purposes that are defined in the privacy rule, those being treatment, payment, or healthcare operations. If it's not for one of those 3 exceptions, treatment, payment, or healthcare operations, any use or disclosure of the PHI that's not specifically required by the privacy rule does require a HIPAA-compliant authorization, and there is a process in place for Jersey Urology Group, including those authorizations if one of these types of disclosures is needed. Importantly, as it relates to the disclosures that can be made, Jersey Urology Group can disclose information to family and friends of an individual, which may happen regularly, under the circumstances listed on this slide. If the individual has provided the consent, the individual does not object, or there's a reasonable inference of no objection based on the professional judgment of the provider. There is a consent form in place that JUG has in that regard. There are also other narrow categories of permissible disclosures that you should be aware of. These include public health activities and certain judicial and administrative proceedings. One of the important takeaways from these types of from this presentation is if there's a question that you have, please reach out to the Jersey Urology Group Privacy Officer, because the Privacy Officer can help walk you through what the information can be disclosed and can't be disclosed. I can also point you to the various forms and policies that are in place for the organization.
In addition to the obligations to keep information private that we've been discussing, HIPAA also grants to individuals or to the patients a number of rights. One important right that individuals have is a right of access to their PHI. And we talk about this today because regularly patients will ask for copies of their records or their PHI. And so it's important to understand that patients do have a right to obtain a copy of their PHI at any time. In addition, a patient's personal representative can also request that information on behalf of the patient. A right of access includes the patient's right to ask that Jersey Urology Group send their records or their information to a third party. Jersey Urology Group, as a covered entity, has to provide a copy of the PHI in the form, format, and manner requested by the individual, as long as it's readily producible in that manner. Jersey Urology Group has to complete any of these requests within no more than 30 days under the federal law. And Jersey Urology Group is specifically limited as a covered entity in being able to charge patients for these records. Jersey Urology Group may charge patients, but it may only be a reasonable cost-based fee within specific parameters. Jersey Urology Group, as part of its HIPAA manual, has developed a very specific process for providing individuals with copies of their records, including how Jersey Urology Group calculates the charges. Jersey Urology Group patients can request copies of their information in 3 different ways, including through Jersey Urology Group's web portal, by completing forms at the Jersey Urology Group office, or by preparing the forms at home and sending them into Jersey Urology Group. Jersey Urology Group employees who respond to these requests should be careful to follow the policies to make sure that they confirm the individual's identity and to make sure that no improper charges are accounted for to the patient. In addition to the right of access that we just spoke about, which is a very common request, there's other rights that patients receive under HIPAA. They have a right to request an accounting of disclosures, to request amendments to their PHI, to request restrictions on the use of their PHI, and to receive communications of PHI by alternative means or at alternative locations. Each patient is also entitled to receive a copy of Jersey Urology Group's Notice of Privacy Practices. Further information and policies and procedures have been developed by your Jersey Urology Group to make sure that it properly complies and is able to accommodate all these rights of its patients.
There are additional privacy rule administrative requirements, and again, the Jersey Urology Group Privacy Officer is aware of each of these different requirements. One of them is that there be a privacy official that Jersey Urology Group has put in place. Second is to make sure that there is a contact person for various complaints that a patient or other person might have with respect to Jersey Urology Group's privacy policies. There's training that's required of all Jersey Urology staff, which is included in what we're doing today as part of today's presentation, and the quiz, which will be part of this presentation. There's other activities that are built in here. You can see the list of these different requirements in here, including things like a sanction policy. If the Jersey Urology Group staff person would act inappropriately or not consistent with the HIPAA privacy requirements, there is the opportunity for Jersey Urology Group to take action against that employee for their activities or their inappropriate activities as it relates to that information. Similarly, Jersey Urology Group is precluded from taking any intimidating or retaliatory act against a patient who might raise a question about whether their privacy rights had been violated. There's a series of documentation requirements that the Jersey Urology Group Privacy Officer has There's an extensive policy manual that all of you have access to understand how to respond to different circumstances that may come up in your day-to-day job activities, or in an unusual job circumstance where a patient asks for certain information. And if you have any questions, you are always advised to turn to the Jersey Urology Group privacy officer to make sure you understand how that process works. So the first part of the presentation today was to talk about the HIPAA privacy rule. We're now going to shift over to what's called the HIPAA security rule. The HIPAA security rule establishes the standards to protect an individual's electronic protected health information. Under the HIPAA privacy rule, all of the protected health information is included, but under the security rule, it's only electronic information. As part of the security rule, the government has set up what's called so-called administrative, physical, and technical safeguards that Jersey Urology Group is required to maintain. And as a covered entity, this HIPAA security rule does apply to Jersey Urology Group. As described on the previous slide, there are a series of different administrative, physical, and technical safeguards that Jersey Urology Group has taken to ensure compliance with the HIPAA security rule. You can see on this slide the list of each of these broken down by what are called required specifications and addressable specifications. If a specification is required, as its name suggests, Jersey Urology Group is required to comply with that specific provision. If an implementation specification is addressable, there's an analysis that Jersey Urology Group has done to determine the appropriate way to meet the specifications of this standard without the government prescribing a one-size-fits-all methodology to do so. So again, each of these steps have been taken by Jersey Urology Group to ensure compliance with the security rule, and you should know that the administrative, physical, and technical safeguards are each in place.
We've selected a few of what we think are key security rule standards to talk a little bit more about today that we thought were important for you to understand and understand why the HIPAA security rule is so important. The first two are a HIPAA risk analysis and a risk management program. And these two go hand in hand. The risk analysis assesses what sort of risks there might be or vulnerabilities that might exist in the electronic systems to the electronic PHI that's maintained by Jersey Urology Group. Part and parcel of that is a management plan to mitigate or minimize any of those risks to a reasonable level. And this is an important compliance tool. And if you are asked as part of the Jersey Urology Group's risk management plan to make any changes or to do things with respect to electronic PHI, you're expected to comply with those requests as part of your job duties. One part of the security rule standards talks about protection from malicious software. It's very important that you avoid, as a Jersey Urology Group employee, opening emails from unidentified people, from opening links, or from opening attachments from senders that look suspicious or from whom you do not know who they came from. The problem with this is that by opening these sorts of items, you can trigger malicious software attacks, including viruses and different ransomware that can potentially harm or cause damage or loss of Jersey Urology Group electronic PHI. Device and media controls. In many instances, thefts and loss of mobile devices, laptops, and removable storage devices have led to many breaches. There may be times that Jersey Urology Group asks you to do certain things in order to protect against these types of losses. Unless you have specific authorization from Jersey Urology Group, there should be no reason for you to take any electronic or other PHI outside of the office with you. A final standard is encryption and decryption. This is what is an addressable standard, and so there may be times that Jersey Urology Group asks you to use encrypted forms of communications for sending electronic PHI. Although this may seem cumbersome, there's important security reasons for you to do this, and so you're expected to comply if Jersey Urology Group asks you to use encrypted forms of communication. We've also talked about that another portion of the HIPAA regulations is what's known as the breach notification rule. And this requires covered entities like Jersey Urology Group to report any breaches of unsecured PHI to the individuals whose PHI was affected, to the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and possibly the media. As a Jersey Urology Group's workforce member, you are expected to report any suspected or known breaches to the Jersey Urology Group privacy officer right away. Critical to understanding breaches is to understand what exactly a breach is. According to HIPAA, a breach is any sort of acquisition, access, use, or disclosure of PHI in a manner that is not permitted by the HIPAA privacy rule, which compromises the security or the privacy of the PHI. There are 3 exclusions from the definition of a breach, which the government has determined are situations that are not serious enough to rise to the level of a breach. One is if there is a good faith, unintentional access by a workforce member of the covered entity and it does not result in any further use or disclosure of the PHI. A second is when there's a disclosure by an authorized person that has authorized access to the PHI to another authorized person, as long as the information is not further used or disclosed. Finally, disclosure of information that could not have reasonably been retained by the individual to whom they were inadvertently disclosed. You should not be making any of these determinations on your own. You should notify the Jersey Urology Group privacy officer of any impermissible use or disclosure of PHI, and the privacy officer, in conjunction with the shareholders at Jersey Urology Group, will determine if something is or is not a breach. We mentioned that breaches only apply to unsecured PHI. Unsecured PHI is PHI that has not been rendered unusable, unreadable, or indecipherable to unauthorized individuals by methodology specified by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So, for example, encryption in specific ways is one manner in which HHS has said that PHI can be considered secured and therefore outside the scope of PHI. And that's why, as we mentioned earlier, if Jersey Urology Group requires that you use encryption in certain circumstances, it's important that you do that because it's also protection against breaches.
So how do you go through the breach analysis if there would actually be a breach? This is going to be a key question if this would ever occur at Jersey Urology Group. Everybody who's participating in this webinar today should understand that the acquisition, access, use, or disclosure of PHI in a manner that's not permitted under the rules is presumed to be a breach. Now, if this would occur, Jersey Urology Group has the burden of overcoming that presumption that there is a breach. And the test that Jersey Urology Group, through its privacy officer, must engage in is to determine if there is a low probability that the protected health information has been compromised based on the internal risk assessment from what was relating to the particular circumstances. So again, if there is a breach, the presumption is there is a breach unless Jersey Urology Group can prove elsewise, and your assistance may be needed in that regard. If in fact there is a conclusion that a breach did occur, there are certain notification requirements that need to be followed. For instance, to the individual or individuals who have been affected, without unreasonable delay and no later than 60 days, they need to be made aware of that breach. The Federal Health and Human Services Secretary may also be notified depending on the timing and whether or not more than 500 individuals are affected. If less than 500 individuals are affected by that single breach, Jersey Urology Group will keep a log of each of those breaches and then provide an annual report to HHS. If there's a breach that affects more than 500 residents in a single incident, the media must be notified, and that must be done without unreasonable delay and no later than 60 days if that would occur. So if there is a breach and notification is required, the Jersey Urology Group will have to act in a very timely way and will require the assistance of all of the Jersey Urology staff to make sure that a proper and thorough investigation is conducted.
So how do you, as a Jersey Urology Group employee, know what to do if there is a breach? First and foremost, make sure as part of your training and becoming an employee of Jersey Urology Group that you review Jersey Urology Group's breach response policy. This can be found in Jersey Urology Group's HIPAA privacy manual. Never act alone if you think there's a breach. Make sure you notify the Jersey Urology Group privacy officer who will make determinations about whether something is or is not a breach. Further, make sure that you are reporting issues to the Jersey Urology Group if you know or suspect that there's been an impermissible or improper use or disclosure of PHI. It's important that all these incidents get reported so proper breach analysis can be done, and Jersey Urology Group makes sure that it's in compliance with the breach reporting rules.
Enforcement. So if something does not act appropriately and there's an issue with Jersey Urology Group, there are various different tiers of penalties that are available to the federal government, because again, remember, HIPAA is a federal law in terms of what sort of responsibility there can be. There's an escalation of the penalties depending upon whether the issue is found to be of no fault, of reasonable cause, of willful neglect that's corrected in a timely manner, or in the worst case scenario, there's willful neglect that the government has found has been uncorrected. So as takeaways in terms of what we need to think about, what do you as a Jersey Urology Group member of the workforce have to do? First and foremost, protect protected health information. Do not let the protected health information be used or disclosed or accessed in an inappropriate manner. As Carrie Lynn had described, make sure you review and follow JUG HIPAA policies and procedures and work through them. If you have questions, there's a place where you can go.
If you suspect there's any sort of HIPAA issue, whether that's an inappropriate use or disclosure of PHI, or whether it's a violation of the rules and the policies and procedures that are going on, your responsibility as a Jersey Urology employee is to, in a timely manner, speak with the Jersey Urology Privacy Officer or one of the Jersey Urology Group physician owners so that the issue can be investigated, and if there is an issue, that it can be corrected.
So again, thank you very much for participating in today's webinar. We've covered an overview of HIPAA, which includes the privacy rule, the security rule, and the breach notification rule, as well as making sure that you understand what your HIPAA responsibilities are. At the completion of this webinar, you'll receive a HIPAA quiz that you are required to complete as part of your training. Thank you very much for participating and for ensuring your continued cooperation with HIPAA requirements and policies to ensure Jersey Urology Group acts in an appropriate way. Have a nice day.